And you are live. Good luck.
Thank you.
You're muted, Godwin. Unmute yourself on.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Ask Muntu. My name is Godwin Toko. I am hosting live from the beautiful city of Jinja. I hope you can hear me. Can anyone confirm? Can someone confirm, the admin? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's pick it up from here. General Mugisha Muntu has been so many things. He's been in the army. He's now in politics. He has been there, seen it, done it. He comes from a family that has had a strong history. There's a lot that we could say about him. And with people like Mugisha Muntu, there's always that temptation to look at them only from the strand of them being politicians. And that's something I'm going to try hard to avoid today. I want us to understand General Mugisha Muntu from other angles, look at his social life, look at things along that line. So without further ado, allow me start the conversation right now. You're welcome, General. Maybe you could speak and I confirm if I can hear you.
Thank you, Godwin. Thank you for hosting me.
Okay, so that does it. We can well hear you. So for those who are joining us, this conversation is live on YouTube, it's live on Facebook, it's live with video on Zoom, and it's also on Twitter Spaces. So whatever is most convenient for you, you can join us through that. And we are glad that you've all joined us. You see the audience is big, and we hope that we'll give you value for your time that you spend here. Hope that when you leave this place, you know more about General Mugisha Muntu and also the Alliance for National Transformation. So General Mugisha Muntu, let me start with you and with your social life. How was it going to school in your days? As a young boy, I imagine going to school through up to the university and all that. Can you just take us through that journey in the best way you can?
Well, my primary was in two different schools. I started off Mbara Junior School, where I did P1 and P2, and then that was in 66, 67, and in 67 we shifted. In 67 we shifted from Mumbara and went to my home place. At that time it was still Ankole, now it is in Tungamo. And okay, you know, Mugisha, I've just learned that you've not unmuted yourself on Twitter. Twitter is also now, the mic is on. It's been unmuted. I hope it can be picked.
Yes, we can pick you now, sir.
As I had already indicated, my primary was in two schools. I started off at Mbara Junior School. I did P1 and P2 there. 67, we shifted. My father resigned from the Ankole government at that time and went back home. Ntungamo, currently Ntungamo at that time, it was still the larger Ankole. And I joined the P2 in Chitunga Primary School, where I went up to primary 7. Then from primary 7, I basically crossed the road and went to Chitunga High School, currently known as Montier High School, and did my O-levels there. And then after O-level, I went to Makerere College School, where I did HSC, from where I more or less remained in the same area, joined Makerere University. My primary was nothing spectacular, I suppose. The only problem I think I had at that time was I used to be not a kid. Not so sure that from P1 until about P6, literally every report per term would have a comment down. He's playing too much in class. And that was a bit of a worry for my parents, and at times they would use the stick. P6, P7 had become a little bit more mature. I wasn't playing that much. And O-level in Chitunga used to be, again, a little bit naughty in different ways. I remember I participated in a strike when I was in senior one, actually. Was a part of the team that was organizing a strike. And S3 there, I had stabilized. I became a prefect of my house, which was called Andes. In Chitunga, the houses were named after mountains. Everest, Andes, Kilimanjaro, Rwenzori, Atlas, like that. And Makerere College School, is an open school. There are no fences, nothing. So more or less, when I joined, that was the first time I spent time in Kampala, or in the city, and had a number of friends, and we would go to, all kinds of entertainment places, in films, parties, and all nature of entertainment in HSC at Makerere College. And from there, when I joined university, I did I was a resident of Western Hall for all the 3 years that I was at Makerere University, and the Faculty of Social Sciences, because I did political science, which I completed in 1981. I almost missed my exams because at that time, I think that's around the time when war started, but we're not going there today. And an incident happened in town when we were trying to connect, and a gathering place where we had gone, waiting for someone who was going to move us, was bust. And then we ran back. University, that's when, luckily, I did my exams, and thereafter we left. So basically, that's a summary of my school time, right from the primary one to the university. At the lower level, I like at primary, I wasn't very active in sports. In the O level, I used to play cricket and baseball. At that time, they were still baseball. I think after some time, I think that's when, during Amin's time, the American teachers and who used to teach in many secondary schools in Uganda, who had introduced sports like baseball, had left. And therefore, even that was more or less abandoned. Eventually, yeah, basically those were the two games that I participated in, and to some extent badminton. No other sports that I was so active in. HSC, I never participated in any sports or games other than, well, basically, yeah. O-level also participated quite a lot in clubs, debating club, drama club, geography club. At HSC, there were no clubs in Makerere University, if I may recall. So we would spend most, besides the class work, we just spend most of our times in, doing other things which would be personal, like going to see, different things in town. I used to like going to cinema halls most of the time, my time in HSC. And basically, I think that would be the summary of my time. And parties, basically parties. We used to have a team of young people who would go, parties. At that time, parties of different types, some of which there was a habit at that time to get crushed some, but it is a habit which I later outgrew. Yeah, basically, I think that's the summary of what I could say.
Okay, I'm actually most surprised of the part of party. I didn't expect that that Mugisha Muntu also partied the way people do it right now. But there's a lot of learning we are going to have today, and it already shows. Now, so today we have all these youth structures. You have the Uganda National Youth Council, you have the Uganda National Students Association, and of course, traditionally, and even today, there are all these leadership positions in schools. So did you at any point participate in that kind of youth leadership? And if you did, how was your experience participating in it?
Unfortunately, when I joined the secondary school was in between 72 to 75. And at that time, we were under a military regime. And there was a lot of uncertainty, like what they used to call NUSU, I think the National Union of Students of Uganda, which was political and aligned to UPC Morris, had been banned. So most of the youth activities would be internal within the schools themselves, like in clubs. I don't recall that there was ever any youth organization that was national in nature. I don't recall at all. And I didn't participate in any. The military, under the military regime, politics was quite a sensitive area. And when I was at Tunga High School, my elder brother was also there before he left for Zambia University. I think it was around 72. More or less around the time when the Tanzanian forces, no, the Tanzanian exiles, attacked on two fronts in Mbarara and Masaka. And it caused a lot of instability within the southern region in Ankole mostly. In fact, I remember one time the headmaster invited us and gave us information that there had been questions about us, but that we should keep calm, that if anything happened, that we would need to report to him. And I suspect there was surveillance around that time around us. Unfortunately, some of the young people at our age, there is a colleague of my father called the late Nehemiah Badanuka, who was the Secretary General of UPC in Ankole. He was very close with my father. Immediately after that attack, his 3 sons were killed in Mbarara. And a number of the political actors, also friends of my father, about 5, 6 of them were also arrested, including the late Baranuka, the late Katundu, the late Lachi. Those were prominent political actors in Ankole, unfortunately also died. So the situation was tense. So things which were political were very sensitive. And in the youth, not only in the youth, even including, like I never heard of any national women's organization or there were no parties, of course. So basically the youth would participate only in things which were within the school, like drama club, like geography club, like those who are in the students, the sculpture union, debating clubs, and things like that, not beyond schools. If I recall vividly, politics was very sensitive at that time.
Okay, thank you. That sufficiently answers it. Now, for those who are just joining us, and I see there's quite a number of people, especially on Twitter, this conversation is happening as well on YouTube and on Facebook, where you can watch the video version of Mugisha Muntu responding to the questions that I'll put to him. And at some point, I already see a couple of people have asked to have the microphone. I'm going to request for your patience. There'll be a point, the last 30 minutes of this discussion will be about you asking questions to him. So for now, let me ask the questions and then you'll come in at that point. So you can join us through any of those channels, and we are grateful that we have you here. So like I said at the start, for those who are not here, we've had Mugisha Muntu in the space of politics, and that's where most of us know him from. I'm trying as much as possible to resist the temptation of not only making this a political conversation, so we can know the other aspects of his life. So I will, as much as possible, try to toe that line, but if I veer off, you will just have to forgive me, because politics is almost everything in Uganda. So back to you, Geno. You make quite often the statement, by God's grace, and other statements that have religious connotations to them. How much does religion influence who you are today and your way of playing politics?
I was born in a Christian family, but basically not born again as is known today. We just go to church, and as young students, when we were in Barara as well as in Chitunga where we went, normally schools at that time had programs where students would be required to attend Sunday. So I would regularly attend Sunday. And I believe that the seeds that were planted then are the seeds that later grew. Because from primary, secondary, HSC, university, much as I was a baptized Christian, I wasn't born again. I wasn't spiritual in any case. And even when I went to the bush, I wasn't spiritual. I became born again much later. I think I started that journey around 98. I did a couple of Bible studies. I did one with the Navigators, which used to be held at All Saints Church. I also did another Bible study at a Baptist church. It's on Nakurabi Road. I think was it called BSU for about 2 years. And basically, it was sparked off by something I read in church one time. That placard used to be, was hanging on the war, a war in All Saints Church. I was there one time when, for some reason, it used to be there, but for some reason, that very time when I read it, it struck something, ignited something within me. The caption below it was saying, footsteps in the sand. It would show two sets of footsteps, and at some point there would be only one set of footsteps. So a question, a person asked Jesus, said, why is it that when I'm in difficult times is when you abandon me? And then Jesus responded that it's actually the time when you see one set of footsteps, that's when I'm carrying you. It struck me in the sense that maybe that's part of human nature for whoever was asking that question to assume that the footsteps were his. And that therefore at that time, Christ had abandoned him. When I look at it from a different perspective to understand that no, during the difficult times, it's when he was being carried. So it's some reason for some, I don't know whether it ignites in other people the same internal realization within me to assume that when you are in tough times, that you're on your own, that you are the one handling the situation. So when they called for a Bible study, and it happened around the same week. So I joined, and I spent the one of the navigators. I spent about a year, this year about 2 years. And by the time I completed the Bible study, I decided to give myself over to Christ as my Lord and Savior. Since that time, I kept on walking that path and growing in it. And basically, that's why a number of times, as you've asked, when I say by God's grace, is because of the realization that without that understanding, that on my own, I know for sure that I wouldn't be able to do anything. As the Bible says, Christ says that is the vine, we are just branches. And if the branch is not, linked to a branch, I mean, if a branch is not linked to the vine, where would it derive its life? So that's the philosophy I later came to know. And I looked back, basically I looked back, and I could see incidents in my life where I had survived, and I knew that it wasn't because of my own capabilities or because of any skill, where I knew a number of incidents where I found that I had survived because there was a larger power beyond us human beings, So since that time, I chose to walk that path.
Okay, thank you, Geno. There's a complaint that some people are not hearing you. I hope now they can hear you loud, because that was made much earlier. So, but if they can't, I hope that you can put the comment, especially those on Twitter, and we can always work on that. Just put in the comment section that there's a problem with the voice if they research, and to be worked on. So now, Geno, you hinted on the sports you played as a student. Now I want to understand where you are today in the field of sports and entertainment generally. Like, what kind of music do you listen to? Which football team, locally, internationally, do you support, if any? And how often do you spend time and watch a game, or go to a stadium in Nambole or Akurukuku or the Green Light Stadium in Arua and watch on Duparaka, when any of these teams play?
No, for sports, I only watch on TV. I never go to stadiums or attend matches or anything. I just watch on TV. I watch football. I don't support any particular team, basically. I watch basketball. I watch swimming, and I don't support any particular team, local or international. I normally find it quite interesting when you find people almost going to fist fights, fighting over teams. I used to be like that when I was still young. Of course, when like primary, secondary schools, I was so immersed in that kind of thing. But for some strange reason, I no longer, I'm no longer that sucked emotionally in supporting any particular team. And I've been trying to to do some activities, exercises like swimming, and I've always tried to play golf, but every time I try, I've never gotten off the range. But this is the only area where I want to be active, in the sense that when you are so busy too, as you advance in age, you need the exercises which are not so taxing to the body. Exercises that need you to walk long distances as you are also active doing something. Yeah.
Okay, that makes it clear. I guess when you're watching TV, you're like my young brother who says, whichever team wins, that's the team I'll jump onto and support for today. But that said, now let's shift to books. How often do you read a book? Are there books you'd recommend for the audience listening in today? Are there books that changed your life? You talked of being a Christian earlier. How often do you read the Bible? So let's talk about reading and books generally at this point.
I read motivational books. I read books about, I read biographies of people, more so people who have gone in politics, in the military, as well as people who've gone through hardship but made it in business and all other areas. People like adventurers of the past. I also read history books. I find them quite interesting to understand where people come from and the journeys they go through until the time where they have reached. And also a lot of books, spiritual books, significant number of them, mostly about testimonies of people. I find it quite interesting. Because at times you see people who have succeeded and when you don't know the journey they have walked, the path through which they have gone, the challenges, the difficulties, and how they overcome them. At times you only read success at the end, but every success story has a journey behind it. And when you read quite a number of them, you find that people have gone through very tough times. It has helped me in shaping my perspective about life, and also helped me in changing a number of things that at times you think are natural to people, that's how you are. It's only after reading people's testimonies, and also even people who are not necessarily spiritual, people who have gone through tough times, and you see how they have shaped the times they have gone through has shaped their character, shape their endurance. So whenever I have time, I do that quite a lot. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Now, again, we shall try hard to resist the temptation to go to where everyone goes, which is politics. But the temptation keeps coming, so I'll still avoid it. Now, I just want to look at life in the bush. 1981, you leave Makerere. At some point, you say, let me go and join these rebels in the bush to liberate this country and make things work the way they ought to. So when you go to the bush, the first day you get there, and the first few days and the months you're there, how was life there? How are you living? What kind of food were you eating? What kind of relationship did you have with the ordinary people and among yourselves, the fighters? Just take us through that life as basically as you can.
Well, when we joined, the first camp that we got into was in Matuga, about 3 kilometers from Matuga town center. And there were about 40 soldiers there.
You know, the network seems to be going off. I don't know.
Was not up to because and about 40 or so.
Hello, Jeno.
Yes, please, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. So you can
Can you hear me
carry.
now?
We are just, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, I don't know. they had, they had
So you can carry on your. Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, I don't know. There's been some interference. So there was another about 40 who are not armed, who had gone ahead. They had gone to open camp.
General, we've lost you on Twitter. I have sent
I have
requests for you to
responded.
speak up. I
have now
I've sent you
responded.
okay.
Can you get me now?
Okay, sorry, we have lost the Geno. Now, especially on Twitter, so now the conversation can continue. Yes, Geno, you're welcome. You can carry on from where you had stopped.
So the first campus had indicated had about 40 officers and men, and they were all armed. The first camp that we went into, we spent about 2 days there, and then there was an arrangement for us to go and join another group, which had gone ahead to create a new camp for training mostly, because the majority of those were not armed. They only had an escort group, maybe about a section. And they were going to open up in areas of Singo. So we went, and when we reached an area, those who know Wero, they would know possibly Makurvita. At night, because we only travel at night, and you were asking about food, we could only eat at night, because it would be very difficult to cook during the day. Because we would be in forested areas, there was fear that if smoke was detected daytime, then it would be a target for the youth groups which used to do reconnaissance for UNLA. So the cooking would be at night, that's when we would eat. And also movement would be at night, right from 81 until 83, when there was a liberated territory. That's when we started moving daytime. But anyway, that time when we reached an area called Makurvita, that's where the story, which is known possibly nationwide now, of the late Tamaguzi, who went to a hiding location in his area close to his house. There used to be a forest where we went. And the following night, when we go there that very night, we found a number of survivors, some casualties of the first group which had been attacked en route to Singo. So they had retreated, a number of them, but more or less in disarray. And then we were all reorganized and went to a new camp where at that time arrangement was made to break up the whole force into about 4 different, five. One was the fighting unit, 4 were training units. And there had been local recruitment from different places, including Kampala, those of us who had come from Kampala. So at that time, we had the first unit where I went, called Mondrane, was in Semto areas, Makurvita areas. And there were about 40 with about 3 guns. So again, cooking would be at night. And the food would be eating would be mostly cassava. Cassava, for the longest time, we survived on cassava. And at times, posh also, which would be bought locally, and at times brought in from areas like Mtiana. The tradesmen who would go to areas like Mtiana from Kampala, and then filter it into where we would be. And we survived like that until about 83, when there was, a liberated territory. And at that time, it was easier to get supplies from different places, of course, and beans. Then between 84, there was an offensive, and we moved out of the whole of the food areas of Bremezi and went into Singo and Ngoma. That's when we depended on the cows. You may have, there's an exercise that has been an ending where there have been, compensating for cows. We survived on meat for 7 months because there was literally nothing else to eat. And all those herds which were in Singo, which were in Ngoma, is what we survived on, literally. And those who know Ngoma and the Singo, there were no gardens or like matoke or anything. If on a few areas, when they would go across Hoima Road, go to areas like more towards Muvende and get food at night. Again, it would be like cassava. At that time, we could cook during the day. The time when we used to cook only at night was 81, 82, 83, it was open. Basically, that's what it was. Tough time, of course, tough time. Actually, I think by 84, I think there are more people who had died out of malnutrition and ill health because of poor diet than those who had died in battle. Yeah.
Okay, that should do it for the bush. But just before, I want to put this question also to you. Seeing all that you've seen since 1981, when you took the decision to go and join the bush, and all that has happened, if this is a very hypothetical question, I must declare, if the hand of the clock was turned back, would you still go back to the bush under similar circumstances today? If we went back to 1980 and what happened then is happening, would you still go back?
And if the factors remain the same, regionally, globally. Hello? If all factors were as they were then, like the regional situation, the global situation.
Yes, if factors were the same, that in that regard, like they were when you were joining the bush then.
Yeah. I mean, there is no doubt about that. The conditions would, because at that time, my belief then was that we had moved in a direction where things seemed that to have a better future, there really had to be a breakdown of the foundations on the basis of which governance was being conducted, and almost start afresh. Because every opening through which people could express themselves had literally almost been closed. So same situation in the areas of injustices that there are. And if I was the same thinking I had then, and now the factors were the same, we wouldn't be here talking about these issues on Twitter and all other social media channels. Definitely, I would be armed and fighting. However, the global situation has changed. The regional situation has changed. The dynamics of fighting internally within the country have also changed. So those influence the kind of choices that people make today. But the most critical one is the experience. The experience that at that time we thought that after winning the war, that we would put in place the foundation established on the principles and values and the ideals that we are fighting for. And we thought that therefore we could sort of build a firm foundation on the basis of which there would be good governance. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I really recognize that armed warfare solves only one problem of the two outstanding problems. You can, if conditions allow, and if you have got the skill and good military strategies and apply the right tactics, you can take power. That has happened in many African countries and even in Asia and some in Latin America. The challenge remains how to use power once you capture it. That is a challenge across. And at that time, it wasn't something that we even thought was possible. So now I know that even now, if there were any people who thought they could fight, I know that even when they would capture power, most likely that's the only one of the two challenges that they would be able to resolve. As to whether they would manage power differently, I have my doubts. Because I see our society. We have very few human beings who can withstand the power of weapons. As happened to us when we took power, the tendency to think that, because we were few, when we took Kampala, we were 15,000. And the 15,000 also built between 85 and 86. By 85, by the time of the coup, we were not even 6,000. I think it would have been about 5,000 thereabouts. So the sense of entitlement is rooted in that. You have few people, there's a big population, and you always have this feeling that the others were scared of fighting. And therefore, it makes you feel as if you are different, you are courageous, and therefore, it's like the rest owe you something. I highly doubt whether we have a society that has a significant number of people who have evolved to a level where even if they make whatever nature of sacrifices, that they would still know that what they were fighting for was a cause for all, that it wasn't only unique to them, and that therefore when they capture power, that they should do the second or resolve the second challenge of managing power better. I highly doubt. I have my doubts. I even talk to many people who believe in that route, and I always tell them, look, I can't discourage anybody because I've ever held weapons to fight. So I would have no moral ground on the basis of which stand and say, don't do that. I only do analysis for those whom I talk to. And one of the things I normally tell them, I tell them that out of 10 people that will fight, even if you take power, even when you take power, my suspicion is that you'll get on about 1 or 2 who will be able to withstand the power of weapons. Weapons are like alcohol, and there are indeed very few people who can withstand the power of alcohol. That's why I find many people drink and they start doing things that would be unimaginable. That's what weapons also do. People get a sense of entitlement. And to me, that is the biggest reason why I wouldn't fight now with the benefit of hindsight. Of course, the other reason now, the global situation, because like in 81, 82, with the time when there were massive displacements of people, when there were internal displaced camps, if anybody is fighting now, doesn't matter where, which part of the world it is. Once you start having refugee situations, literally whoever is involved in fighting will most likely be tagged as a terrorist organization. That's a challenge that many people who would want to resolve political questions using weapons would face now. We didn't face that then. So I think those are the views that I would contribute to that particular question.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's bring it to something that is still even trending as of now in Uganda, and that's the issue of climate change. So Uganda has gotten sucked into all this debate thanks to EACOP, East African Crude Oil Pipeline, and were the subject of a debate in the European Union Parliament. And that debate aside, the debate on EACOP has been, the debate on climate change has been around for so long. People are attributing a lot of climate atrocities we face these days on that. So what is your view on climate change, and how best, if you find it to be problematic, can Uganda handle climate change today?
There are issues which are within our reach and to which any government would need to handle. The others which are global. I mean, like if there's a devastation of forests in the Amazon, or like the Congo forest, the Amazon, we have no capacity to influence literally anything other than the voices that the country would give, like in the UN. But beyond that, I don't think they would be able to do much. Even Congo is not within our under our control like of Uganda, but now being part of the East African community, I suppose that all the 7 countries need to put effort together. And back in each country, like in Uganda, the forest cover is literally being decimated. And there are a number of factors why that is so. One is poverty. And before poverty is resolved, I don't see how you can resolve the issue of deforestation other than planting trees. Yes, that can be a conscious, deliberate, focused program to which a government can put resources to ensure that they go into reforestation or go into afforestation. But if you look at the people who use firewood and charcoal, they are the biggest number. I suppose they're about 70+%. And inevitably, they have to use charcoal and firewood because the alternative means, like using gas or electricity, is too expensive for them. And therefore, governments have to design programs specifically to tackle it from 2 sides. One, focus on economic development and where individuals are lifted from the levels of poverty in which they are, so that they can make generate revenues that can cater for them in their areas of need, whether it is health, whether it is education, whether it is use of, when they are cooking, like use of biogas or use of cooking gas, like those who are in towns do use, and hydropower, those who can afford it. It's, of course, the other area of interventions could be design programs where even before people are able to access, like you use means like gas and electricity to energy saving stoves. There are quite a number of initiatives. You see local initiatives. I've seen like stoves where people have designed a stove which uses volcanic rock, and understand it reduces the use of charcoal by a significant percentage, 80+%. I have not followed it closely, but an initiative like that started by individuals, a government could put resources behind that, because the initial cost is what impedes people. But the running costs are low, because it would be cheaper even than using charcoal. Because a sack of charcoal now is about 60,000 plus. And when you are using rock, if you are going to reduce the use of charcoal by 80%, if you use those volcanic rocks, it means that you would be spending maybe about maybe 20,000 or something thereabouts. But the initial cost of those stoves is high, because they are more than 700,000. I think some of them go to about 1 million Who's going to raise that kind of money? Those peasants who use charcoal. So there would have to be a program of intervention to see how they can be either mass production or in making them cheaper, or working out programs where they can find out ways in which they can distribute those kinds of stoves on a mass scale as a way of saving the environment. Because when you look at the areas where there used to be forests, the forest cover is diminishing at a very, very fast rate. It needs research, of course. So any responsible government that wants to make interventions in forests, and of course timber harvest also, that's another area. There has to be a lot of discipline and enforcement, because I can understand when there's harvest of timber, like in softwood, they planted forests like eucalyptus, like cypress, but to cut down like mahogany, you know, like in those natural forests, and cut them down indiscriminately, you need a lot of resolve on the side of those who are in government, and enforce discipline without any mercy for the forests which are natural. But because of the lucrative nature of such trade, many people, those who are involved in that trade, evade, because there is a collusion, the forest department, in police, and all that, and all that. But the cost is going to be high overall. And then the swamps. Many places, there's of course the growing population. And also, once there's growing population, and more people encroach onto swamps in some areas. Swamps have been decimated almost. Areas where which used to have cold climates, like in the West Kaaba, used to be such an area. The weather patterns have changed. Ankore is also like a river like Ruizi, a significant number of rivers in the country, besides the draining of swamps. People not following the laws that govern cultivation along rivers. There's a certain number of meters to which people are not supposed to cultivate. But again, the laxity in enforcement. You see, like in Kampala, or all those areas, swamps which drain into Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is a shallow lake. I understand it's about 80 meters deep. So you can imagine if there is no discipline on all sides, and the swamps are drained. A lake like Victoria, which is shallow, is highly vulnerable. So it's discipline. I think the laws are in place, they're adequate. If there's enforcement, there would be at least there'd be a cut-off point, and then you can see how a turnaround would be done. Resources, there needs to be resources pumped into that area, but discipline is the most critical. If you don't have a government that is disciplined, and therefore you find that those who are supposed to do enforcement instead become collaborators, we'll keep fighting a losing battle, like it seems to be the case right now. Of course, there's also pollution, but that's global. I mean, when it comes to pollution with motor vehicles and things like that, but I don't think it is as here. It's not as bad as it is in countries like China or Europe or America. So I don't think that will be an immediate issue. But globally, that is changing because the world is now shifting to electric vehicles. Maybe in another 10 years or so, most of the manufacturers will be manufacturing electric vehicles, and therefore there would be change even in Africa as a consequence of the trend that would have changed in the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you. So the other, for those who have
the other issue, of course, is
the plastics is another scary area. There are places you go to and you can see that there is a problem. Again, that's discipline of enforcement. One, to ensure that recovery of plastics which are already used and recycling processes for government to support those in the private sector who would want to invest in the recycling and to do it aggressively. And also to determine the gauge of the plastics, because there are certain laws. Some countries that enforce it fully, you can go there and see a big difference. There are some countries whose resolve and whose discipline in enforcement of like use of plastics. You go there and you see the environment completely different. If you compare with what you see in the towns here in Uganda, in Kampala or any other town you go to. That's another area that where there really needs to be enforcement.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, winding up, and I will invite the audience to ask their questions immediately after this question. So you can begin making requests for the microphone. I see Honorable Kahindo Tafiri has joined us, Duncan Aligaba, and a couple of other people. I'll be very impressed if all of you can put a question to the group general. Now, let me just look at the issue of population. Uganda's population has grown exponentially over the last 20, 30 years. Some say that's a good thing, and they give reasons for it. Others say that's a very, very bad thing. In fact, the projections put it that by about 2050, it could be as many as 100 million Ugandans. Now, I want to get your view on that. Do you think this is a good thing? If not, why? And do you think this is a bad thing? And if it's a bad thing, how do we control it from going further?
The question is discipline and the concentration in building expanding the economic base and ensuring that they sustain economic development that can cater for an expanding population. And also concentrating a lot on education. Education is the one which eventually, by its own nature, because the more affluent people are, the more educated people are, the tendency to give birth to fewer children, rather than using draconian measures to reduce population growth, like what Gandhi tried to do in India. But at the same time, when you look at discipline that is applied in a country like China, where you find, I think, about 1.3 billion, about 1.3 billion now, or possibly 1.4 billion. But you can see, because of their concentration on growing their economy, they have been able to feed their population. They're able to create services in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, and Africa being a huge mass, because you can feed China and Europe and possibly America in the whole of Africa, and there will still remain space. There's a question of governance and using technological advancements. The population, big as it is, because Africa overall, you've talked about Uganda. Uganda, we're about 45 million so far, and indeed by 2050 we could be close to 100 million. But the whole of Africa will be about 2.3 billion. But if there's coordinated effort and discipline in managing our resources, there would be capabilities developed to cater for all that is necessary to sustain such a population, not only in terms of education, but also health, as well as feeding, because there is no resource on this continent that we do not have. So I think it goes back to really to discipline. And as the people get more and more educated, and they become also economically self-sustaining, and they enjoy affluence, the lower the next generation. You'll find that while in the generation before us, they were giving birth to about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children, you will find that the next generations will be giving birth maybe average at about 3, 4. So by that in itself, it will start checking the population growth.
Okay, finally from me, before I bring in the audience, especially on Twitter, when this good idea of the East African community, how do we make it work better? Because we've been at it for quite some time, and yet to everybody's credit, a lot of progress has been made, and yet there are those who think we should have been further than we are now. So if we are to make things go faster and to get further, how do you advise the policymakers to do things going forward?
It has to be a shift in mindset, because there is a desire for cooperation and even federation or unification, but at the same time, there isn't enough courage. I suspect when you look at the capitals, they want to cooperate, but they don't want to cede power. It's a contradiction they must resolve. There's no way you can federate without ceding power to the center, certain powers to the center, you know? And two, while customs union protocol was implemented, and it definitely proved that all countries would benefit, and it did. Initially, it was an unknown area, but when it was implemented, all countries benefited. And then they got stuck on the issue of the common market. Common market, there is an emotional blockage in the minds of a number of leaders in different countries. Because while they would desire to see free movement of goods and services and capital, they are hesitant when it comes free movement of labor. But you cannot allow one and not allow the other. And I think that is the biggest challenge. The moment they overcome the fears of the unknown, because there's a feeling that when you open up borders and you allow people to move, labor to move, that some countries fear that they'll be swamped. You know? I don't see how you can eat your cake and have it at the same time. So the moment there's a shift in mindset, and for example, if they looked at the United States of America, 54 states, and if the desire is to have free movement of capital, goods and services, and labor, then America would be the best example. Because you can be a resident of California, and you can choose to move from California and go to Texas or any other of the 52 states. You can move your industry or your whatever you are engaged in to any place where you want to go. And it works. Wherever the opportunity, people ship there. I mean, you can see a country like Uganda. Okay, Kampala is about 4 million people now. We are 45 million people. But every town you go to all over the country, there are people there. So why don't people why doesn't all of Uganda come to Kampala? No, because the opportunity is even where people are. People in West Nile, there are opportunities in West Nile. People in Teso, there are opportunities there, different nature. People in Kigezi, Ankole, Toro, wherever. Just like it is in Tanzania, just like it is in Kenya. So the moment, if they understood that when they open up borders for free movement of labor, capital, and goods and services, then someone in whatever town here in Uganda who chooses to go to Tanga, they'll go to Tanga and they establish whatever they want to establish. And there's someone who in Tanga may want to deal closer to Congo, and they'll come to Kasese. And the person in Gulu may decide to go to Mbeya and establish a business. But there is no way you're going to have mass movement of people from one area to another. It just simply does not happen. But the people are terrified of that. And the moment there is that kind of situation, now there are 7 countries, huge countries. South Sudan is, I don't know how many times they're larger than Uganda, maybe 3 or 4 times. Congo, same. Tanzania is a huge country. They only have to put in place mechanisms to ensure that nobody goes into any of those areas and occupies the land in any way they want. So they can put mechanisms where, for example, a resource like land remains under the control of the local governments in those areas. On the land, what is? But moving, capital or establishing service industries, anyway, that would be the best boost for the economies in this whole region. I mean, we see people coming in here from China, from US, from wherever, but it will encourage the people from the 7 countries. And in any case, really, we are trapped in borders which necessarily were not of our own making, without doubt. If colonialism hadn't intervened, right now, nobody can say with any certainty how these countries will be shaped. First, we don't know whether there will be 7 countries. Maybe there will be more, maybe there will be less. Because the colonial intervention stalled the natural processes of state formation. We know kingdoms like Uganda, which at some point had been expanding. Then there was Bunyoro. Then, of course, southwards, the Ngoni movements. When you look at the whole of Africa, the configuration would be completely different. It was intervened. There were interventions. It didn't develop that. So now we are Ugandans, we are Kenyans, we are Tanzanians. Yes. So that identity be stuck in our minds as if it was a natural progression itself beats me to understand. It was not of our own making, but now with the education that we have, with the experiences that we have, with what we see happening elsewhere, it would be easier for us to make conscious choice, more so because of survival in the global environment. Smaller units, which are weak economically, which are weak politically, the only survival is when they concentrate their resources and are able to, have advantage of large land masses, large populations, and also build capabilities. But the critical thing is governance. My hope is that really, when we reach that point of integration, that would not repeat what we have been doing at the national level. It would be the most disastrous thing to escalate what is at the national level and put it in a unit like the whole of East Africa. Imagine the mismanagement that has been happening at the national levels in some of the 7 countries. If it was being practiced at the national level, I mean, it would be like a jungle. It would be worse than what we see in the single units. So one hopes that as we sort out our national domestic political problems, that by the time we integrate, that we would transfer the good practices and completely eliminate the negative practices that we have gone through in the last 60 years, or 62, 63, depending on which country you're talking about. But integration is very, very important.
Okay, thank you very much, Gino. For those who joined us along the way, this conversation is live streaming on Facebook and live streaming on YouTube. That means that the record will be there and you can always go and watch it from the start on those channels, and better still, it will be in video form for those who are getting us on the audio form, that is Twitter Spaces. Now, I said at the start of this conversation that I would try really hard not to go into the politics, because the politics is what we discuss every day and live every day. And I have tried hard not to. I see in the comments, I'm not the most popular person right now. Someone is wondering why I'm sticking to those old things when there are things like the Public Order Management, I mean, the Computer Misuse Act amendment to discuss. But I request that you forgive me. We shall have another time to discuss those other things. Now, it's the time when we bring in the audience, and I have handed out the microphone to 3 people. So I'm going to start with Patrick. Patrick, unmute. This is on Twitter Spaces. Unmute and ask your question.
Thank you. my question to General Mugisha Muntu is, he has thought of having a
the civic perspective, you can pick some leaf on it. Then the other question is about having a common language as a country. Uganda, given the fact that we have a lot of tribes, different regions speaking different languages. So as the Alliance for National Transformation, I know communication makes economy grow faster. So what is the plan? For instance, can we have Uganda have language being spoken as an official language, not of course I'm excluding Swahili and English. How can we make this happen to make communication easier? Then the other issue is about land. We have a lot of issues with land, most especially the public land or government land being grabbed by different individuals. What is the plan for the Alliance for National Transformation? Because, like, for instance, now in Ruhinda North, in my sub-county, Telco, we have a lot of contention about standard land being grabbed by individuals, and it seems leaders are keeping quiet on this. Those who are fighting, they are being overpowered because people have money. So what is the plan of the Alliance for National Transformation towards streamlining that? Thank you so much. I beg to submit.
Thank you. Now, those who come first go without the rules. So now let's set the rules. We're going to each ask one question. We make it as precise as possible so we can have many more people asking. And I'm going to request and ask the general, do you prefer answering each question as they come, or we could take 3 and then answer them and then wait for the next batch of 3? Geno?
Having them in a batch of 3, and then responding to a batch of 3, and then we allow another 3.
Awesome. So,
is that okay?
Yes, that's okay. That's perfect.
Godwin.
Yes, that's perfect, sir. Let's have the person using the name. Yeah, the gentleman asked 3, so I think it's actually wiser that you take the 3, then we bring in other 3 people who will ask 3 questions because we won't allow people to ask more than a question going forward. Yes, sir.
Patrick asked about, yeah, he talked about something, maybe I need to give clarification because I think he got it, he didn't get it clearly. When we're on civic space, I was trying to focus a lot on the party building effort. And I was saying that our constitution requires that it is parties which are vehicles of governance. As we speak, and it's only a party which can run government here in Uganda. There is no other form of organization that is provided for that can compete for power. For example, you cannot have an NGO competing for power. Nor can you have a religious organization competing for power. So the vehicles of management of power so far are political parties. So my argument was, as it has been for quite a while, that for us to fix the problems of the country, we have to focus a lot on party building. Because when you have the vehicles of government, parties as the vehicles of governance, when a party is not in good shape, there is no way it can manage to resolve the issues that are challenges to the country and to the people. And when you want to change the direction of a country, then who gives direction? It is the people in power, and the people in power would belong to a party that would be running that government, either as a single party or if they are in a coalition. So I simply can't understand why we are not putting a lot of effort and attention to party building, because any party which is in power can only give what it has. If it has men and women who are well organized, who subscribe to the principles and values and ideals of the party as they pronounce them, they'll be able to manage a country. But if within a party you find that maybe they have good principles, maybe they have good programs, they have maybe policy positions that they have established in their manifesto. But if you find that they do not walk the talk, then when they are in power, they would be saying one thing, but doing something different, as has been the case in many African countries. So to fix the challenges of management of power, we have to concentrate on party building. For parties to concentrate on recruiting people who believe in the ideals the parties stand for. And in practice, not just talk about them. The Americans said talk is cheap. I mean, all of us can say the right things. Since '62, there's no party which has been power, and it has come out in the public and said, when we get to power, we'll be corrupt. Or when we get to power, we'll be unjust. Or when we go to power, we will practice nepotism. Or when we go to power, we'll divide people. Or when we go to power, we will oppress people. No party ever says that. When you read the manifestos of parties, the constitutions of parties, you reach a conclusion that parties are democratic, parties are full of leaders and members who can run a country. But the practice has always been different, as we have seen so far in the last 60 years. So there has been more and more concentration on party bureaucracy. This is to me my understanding of wanting to fix whatever problems we are going to fix. Every individual only give you what they have. An organization is as a result of the combined capabilities of the individuals, most who are in the top leadership. You are talking about like NEC of the party, or the National Council of the party. Most times you'll find about 20, 50 people. So if you have a party which has got a National Council of 150 people, if out of those you have got 120 who don't have the discipline to manage national resources in a frugal way, in a disciplined way, to put resources where they are meant to be.
Yes, there has been. So I'm turning on my microphone to pick your sound and then broadcast it there. You can continue.
I am reconnected again.
All right. That's perfect.
I am reconnected again to Zoom. I am saying that parties need to spend a lot of effort in specific targeting and recruiting men and women who would be able to organize and improve the parties in terms of what they stand for and putting it into practice. That's the way we can solve the problems of this country, depending on whichever party goes into power, when it is well organized and when it is composed of men and women. Like I was saying that, like for example, National Council, if it is 150, if you find 120 men and women who are incorruptible, who believe in justice, who believe in fairness, who believe in transparency in the management of national resources, there's no way that party will fail to govern well. But you must fix the parties. So Patrick, that's what I was trying to say. Common language, yes. 7 countries, the language so far, which would possibly be best applicable, I think, would be Kiswahili. Kenya already speaks Swahili, Tanzania speaks Swahili, Congo, largely, Rwanda, Burundi, largely, Uganda to some extent, South Sudan, I don't know. I don't think there are many who speak Kiswahili. Kenya wasn't a Swahili speaker, even Tanzania. In Kenya, what they did, they used, Tanzania used to speak Swahili more than Kenya, but they had a deliberate program where they started teaching Kiswahili in primary for 7 years. And in about 15 years, everybody in Kenya could speak Kiswahili. That's the same path that we need to take here in Uganda. We already have it in the constitution as a national language, or is it? Yeah, I think, and as a national language. So there needs to be investment in that regard. Uganda should recruit teachers from Kenya or Tanzania, and maybe have exchange programs. Have Ugandan teachers who can go and teach other subjects, but to get Tanzanians or Kenyans who can come and teach. That doesn't stop a natural progression of a local language. But you see, any local language that would speak in be spoken within any of the 7 countries, most likely would stop at its borders. If, like in Kenya, they chose to speak Akamba, the whole of Kenya, it wouldn't go beyond the Tanzanian border or Ugandan border and be learned here in Uganda. Similarly, if in Uganda, for example, we chose to speak Lugisu, I don't think it will go beyond the Ugandan borders and go into Congo, for example. You know, so there needs to be a language specifically for the whole of East Africa that would enable us in trade, enable us in diplomacy internally within our community, the community of 7 countries. And Kiswahili is the best position, I think, that can offer that. Land is a problem all over the country. There is a problem of discipline in the country. The only way the land issues will be resolved is streamlining the investigative arm of government, the criminal investigation department, add more resources, train more manpower, remunerate them well, motivate them, and then the prosecutions department, as well as the courts. And then establish computerized systems like is happening now, but on a more aggressive scale, to ensure that all land is registered. And then they go and resolve all the land issues where you find more than 1, 2 titles. And when you have effective investigative services and the court systems are functioning well and prosecutions department are functioning well, and they deal with the backlog of cases in the courts, then people can regain trust and follow the law. I personally am part of, I've had the land problem in the courts of law for 10 years. Someone has been trying to cheat my land, but I have stuck, you know, in that path of following the law. And because I know that eventually that's the only way these issues can be resolved. Because if each one of us now decides to take, you know, the law into our own hands, I mean, there'll be chaos all over the country. You know, the guy who's trying to take my land is a peasant. Sometimes I would ask him, do you really think if I wanted to use extra legal means, you think I wouldn't have access to people who could come and sort you out? But that's the nature of our people. They believe in bribery, because most times you have powerful people behind them. You know, they just give the money, they go bribe in the investigative branches of the state. They'll go to the prosecutions department, you find they are trying to, you know, wield influence there. The court systems also are compromised. So there is a mess in that area of land. There's a crisis, there's no doubt about that. I don't know whether the current government has got the discipline that is necessary to resolve such a huge problem. I don't know. We'll keep watching, maybe let them try, because in practice, if they did that, we would feel it. If they fail, as I suspect they will, then the next group that is getting in really needs to be well prepared. And it's one of the biggest challenges that our people face. I notice, for example, when you are someone at least who can, you know, be able to put money, give lawyers, What about the peasant? Why would a peasant get money to pay for a lawyer and stay in court for 3, 4, 5 years? Moving witnesses, all those are costs. So it is one of the biggest oppressive things, I think, that our people are suffering, in the country. And then you find those, of course, who use the state security apparatus, bribing police, bribing soldiers, who go and mess up people. It's a problem. I recognize that. We hope this regime can have the necessary discipline. I have my doubts. I don't know whether they can resolve that. So those who are going to be in power next are the ones who must prepare and clean up the mess.
Okay, let me take up the next set of 3 questions. Please be precise, go straight to the point and ask just 1 question. And if you can use 30 seconds, that'll be perfect. So let's start with the person using the name East African. Please unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Okay, thank you, Jeno, for giving us your time. We love it like that. Focus question. The last one happens to be my first question. I had 2 and that limits me to 1. Maybe if I may add on a little bit, how possible is it for South Africa to unite politically, especially having seen how individual countries are fighting hard to unite politically? Then my real question is, a lot has been said on the Bushful times. How have you found your social life, especially being a retired and an active opposition politician? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. East African, I know that's not your real name, but I'll call you that. So, Mr. Kamara, can you please unmute and ask your question? Sorry, my bad. It's Chimera. Mr. Chimera, John. Chimera, John, please unmute and ask your question. Okay, since Chimera is not here, Mr. Muezi, please unmute and ask your question. Muezi, are you still here? Okay, Chimera, I see you've unmuted. Can you ask your question, please? Chimera has all of a sudden gone off. Muhezi, can you ask your question? Okay, Timo, please ask your question. Unmute and ask. Is there a problem? Timo? Can you, okay, Levi, can you unmute and ask your question? Good evening, Levi.
Good evening. I feel a little bit late, but let me ask a simple question. In this country, we have 2 groups. There is one group that is in government, and there's one that is waiting as an alternative. My question to you is, as a person who has been following politics of this country for some time, I'd like to know from you, General, why is it that the group that is waiting as an alternative, the group that is waiting to take on government as in to replace the government that is in power now, why is it that is more disorganized than the one they intend to replace? That is my question.
Thank you, Levi.
Thank you.
Timo, are you on? Rakabi? Rakabi, are you on? Rakabi is not on. Timo is not on. So let me get two other people who will actually be our last questions because our time is already fast spent. So whoever can ask, just unmute and ask. Those will be the two questions that we go with.
Hello. Thank you, Gideon. This is Myers. Thank you, Gemma, for your time. I have two questions. One is he talked about reading books. I would like to know if he has written one or he is planning to write, because he's one person who speaks and everyone believes, yes, he's informed. Has he considered putting some of that information into writing so that other people can benefit from his wisdom? Two, as an opposition figure who worked with the government, how do you manage to survive, more so financially? Because we understand that opposing a government, most especially in Africa, is kind of hard and you're always squeezed. How have you managed to survive for this long? Thank you.
Thank you. Chibwene, are you here? If you are, please unmute and ask. Chibwene?
Yes, thank you so much. Can you hear me, Mr. Toko?
Yes, sir. I can hear you loud and clear.
Good evening to you, and good evening to everyone. Salute to you, General, and good evening to all actually. So my question to General is one. Okay, it's not a question. It's like an observation. We've seen in the news. Okay, when Makerere University was actually celebrating 100 years, the Speaker of Parliament was speaking about these government scholarships programs that are given to students, given to the rich, to the well-off families, those who are studying from good schools, those who pay even schools, secondary schools that even pay more than one university's pay. I'd like to ask General to give us advice. Which criteria can government, or what can they do to make sure that all these the scholarships are given to really the needy, not actually the people who are well off, so that there's quality in education? Because if someone can manage to pay school fees in a very expensive school like HTM, and then gets still a scholarship, so what can government do, or what can be done really more quality so that the poor can also benefit? Because for example, I come from that, but I know very many people who are poor because of they cannot manage to pay for tuition for higher students. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I have been reminded that our time is fast spent. So, Jono, you're going to ask those questions and we shall call it that for today. Yeah, you can take on the questions now.
Thank you, Godwin.
Jono, are you here? Hello, Jono Mugisha Muntu.
Okay, integration, I believe in that myself. I believe that.
I had said from the start that this conversation has been live streamed on Facebook and on YouTube. That means that there's permanent record. If I'm to borrow the words of Edward Snowden, of this conversation on those channels, and you can always go back there and watch the conversation we had today. So I think the Geno is back. Geno, if you're back, please, can you answer the? It's your time to answer the question now.
Can you hear me, Godwin? Hello.
Okay, there's a small glitch that we are working on to get the Geno back as a speaker on Twitter, so he's able to answer the questions. Yeah,
Can you
it's getting
hear me?
sorted. And I hope that for the time you've spent here,
Can you hear?
you've learned much more about the Geno, especially from his social life and his views on issues like population rise, climate change, that have become very, very hot topics of discussion, not just in Uganda, but around the world lately. So, Geno, just respond to the microphone request I'm sending you on Twitter. Or you could ask for the microphone, and
Yep,
then you'll be
I
able
am
to speak
doing that.
and respond to the 3 questions that our distinguished panelists put before you. Hello, Geno.
I'm doing that, but seems that it's not coming through. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh dear.
Godwin? Godwin?
Okay. Sadly, it looks like we've lost Geno. And
Can you hear me?
Geno Mugisha Muntu, are you here?
I am.
Looks like we've lost
Can you
him,
hear me?
especially on Twitter. And our time being fast spent, I'm going to be pushed into cutting the conversation here. I hope that you really had a great time listening in to him. We organize these conversations monthly. They are organized, I shouldn't say we, by the Alliance for National Transformation. That's the political party that he led in the last presidential elections, and that he continues to play a pivotal role in as a national mobilizer alongside other people. We hope that when we have the next conversation, they happen monthly, you will still join us. And if you could go now and follow National Alliance page so that you can get notifications
Can you hear
and
me now?
engage with the Geno going forward, that will also be very, very good of you. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope that our objective has been achieved, and I hope that when we have the next conversation, we can then talk about the topic that we avoided today, the politics, and ask things about the politics of the party and his own politics. From this side, we are glad that you joined us, and may you have